Bijoya Sawain is here with us today. She is the author of Shadow Men. Hi, ma'am.
Well, hi, Jessica. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Shadow Men comprises a novella and two short stories, The Flight and The Limp. So, why this unique combination? What purpose does it serve?
I'm so happy you asked about this because, most people missed out what I want to talk about love. Because I feel that human nature, unless it's preconditioned or tampered with, loves naturally and unconditionally. So in Shadow Men, very few noticed, that Kme Uflin, the old lady who worked in this big house, she's a pure soul who comes from the village and she hardly ventures out. So she loved Robert Nongrum, the driver, the Khasi driver, as much or equally, as much as she loved the two Bihari gardeners, Suresh and Ravi. And I thought that was something that's so typically a Khasi endearing trait. When they're not tampered with, they're not preconditioned, they come from the village, they're really pure souls. That's a Khasi woman. That's a Khasi woman I wanted to project, and I'm so glad you asked about it. So when my publishers, approved of these two short stories, I was so happy because it continues with this theme of love. For example, in The Flight, Moi, the Mizo girl, she also comes from a village. She's a simple girl, and when she fell in love with Zakir, the Assamese carpenter who worked in the big house, she didn't know what the fuss was all about. Whereas Mingtangi was worked in Assam and in Delhi, she was more aware. She had been tampered with, you can say, her mind. She was telling her all the time that please don't go for this. And in The Limp, Nipendro, he's an innocent, wide-eyed boy who came from Bangladesh. And he just loved Shillong. And he loved this large-hearted, generous, cheerful Khasi woman countess right to the end, in spite of going through so much. I mean, in fact, his cousin came up all the way from Assam, attended a funeral. So this book is also about love, how important it is. And we should tap our inner selves to rediscover this. And I think this post-pandemic is a time of healing, and I hope that this will come about. It's very important.
All right. But ma'am, why, choose to publish it as a novella and two short stories? Was it an editorial decision, or did you suggest this to your publisher?
It was a joint decision, because we thought, after this heaviness of this book, let me continue with the theme and give it, because I want to talk about the whole of the Northeast. So, this talks, like in The Limb, it talks from the outsider's point of view, right? His love for the local people. And in The Limb, you can see that it also extends to Mizoram. And it extends the whole of the Northeast, really. And yeah, I think it was a joint decision, and very happy about it, actually. Yeah.
That's quite interesting. That actually brings me to my next question. So you said that this has been inspired from the insurgency in Meghalaya in the 1970s. So, how difficult was it to write about this? Because, it's almost horrific.
Yes, it took me a long time to write, and actually it was published in 2010, but I think the time was not right. So this book was really receding into oblivion, And then with Speaking Tiger Books, I worked on it again, and I put a lot of inputs into it. And I think it's just the time has come. And it took a long time because it's a very, very, it's still relevant, And I'm so glad it has surfaced again because it is important to know,
So, Shadow Men is essentially a very atmospheric novel. How easy or difficult did you find to write such a novel? Did your drafts, change over time? And how did you capture the tone of such an atmospheric novel?
Jessica, when I wrote it finally, you know, the first draft, I wrote, I just wrote it on the day it happened, actually, that misty August evening when the militants ran through my parents' home. And then all the things that had been told to me, my experiences, my conversations with various people just came back to me. And about, you know, I think people wanted to know also that isn't it too much of a personal perspective? Will it hurt anyone? But I feel that it is not a whimsical or fanciful perspective. It's based on real experiences, real conversations I've had. And this matrilineal, problem, there was a Sahitya Academy meeting in Ranchi. And I had to go there because they were giving me an award for a short story called The Stepfather, very Khasi story. And you know, I'd arrived there, and my roommate was another writer called Miniman Lalu. And just before dinner, the organizers came to me and they said, "Ma'am, it's for the translations." So I said, "What translation? I thought you already done mine." So they said, "No, it's about Kinfam Singh Nonkanri's poem." Now, Kinfam Singh is one of the most brilliant poets we have in Meghalaya. So I said, "Yeah, but he's already arrived also from Guwahati, you know." So they said, "No, can you read this poem?" So I read it. It was about the Khasi mother. And when I read it, and I said, "Oh my God, I don't know this Khasi mother." And it was like very, very virulent, and it was very, very almost abusive. So I said, "Look, why don't you talk to him?" He said, "This is a very personal thing." So I asked Miniman. Miniman said, "It does exist, but it's a very personal question. Why don't they ask Kinfam?" So when we met at dinner, I asked Kinfam, and I said, "Kinfam, the translation." She said, "Yes, they're very worried about my translation." But I said, "Go ahead exactly as it is." So I said, "You mean it exists because you have a very good relationship with your mother?" He said, "Bijoy, it exists." And of course, he said, "You lead a very cloistered life, and you know, a very sheltered life. You don't even know what's happening outside." So I had to keep quiet. But after I read that poem, I started thinking back, and I went home to Shillong and talked to so many of my immediate family who didn't also know that these things exist, that there was so much partiality towards the daughters, and there was so much of pain and anger within the men. So I think that was how I started looking into our matrilineal system. It's not matriarchal, it's matrilineal. We take the lineage from the mother, but the mama is the head of the family, the maternal. So, you know, so when you ask me, was it difficult to write? Isn't too much of a personal perspective. I think it's not really personal. It's based on facts. And it should be taken as such. We have to go to the root of the problem to solve any problem, anywhere. We can't, you know, use the blame game, and we can't always skirt the issues, the root of the problem. This way we'll just go on and on, you know. That's what I feel, Jessica. Yeah.
Right. So, you know, like you said, that it is actually based on facts, and Shadow Man is set in Shillong. So, you know, how, like, you created this work around your own community, and it's definitely, like, you know, underrepresented due to the weight of perception and the possibility of the misunderstandings. So, in that sense, you know, how difficult was it to write it, in the sense that was it a restricted work, like it will essentially always be a representative work, you know, rather than an independent work of art?
Well, to me, as long as it you know, makes sense to the people who I'm writing for, it's fine. But it actually goes beyond that. It talks about all areas of conflict, where there's hatred and conflict for no rhyme or reason. And you know, like when you get angry, you get so drained. Imagine a whole community draining all their positive energy because of anger and hatred. When are we going to move on? When are we going to develop? So I hope it'll be read everywhere. And I think some passages are quite beautiful and can be read as a work of art. my description of rain, the mist, and so on. But I really wrote it from a sense of responsibility and really with a sense of hope that it'll do some good to areas of conflict, especially in my own community in Meghalaya.
Yes. All right. Coming to the concept of, an outsider, the theme of an outsider is very much present in the two short stories in the book. So, could you shine some light on that? As in, was it a conscious decision on your part? Like, why include it in the book?
Yes, there's a lot. You see, I was really trying to see the violence. The violence was just going on, and it was always directed towards the outsiders. Okay, and some of them who have lived there for half a century or even more. Even as from the 1920s, people were coming up. From East Bengal, from Bihar, from all over India. And I thought we have to work together in harmony. Just because we got our own state, that doesn't mean we just forget about the rest of India. And we can't develop on our own. So it was a conscious effort because I thought that the violence, the people were taking it out on the outsiders when that was not entirely the reason. And outsiders were not entirely the reason for our not going forward. We had to examine ourselves. And all I want to say was that Matrilini, gives the Khasi a distinctive character. I agree to that. But you see, we have to also move with the times. Only adjustments have to be made. Certain changes have to be made. And that's why I wrote Shadow Men. Because, it worked very well, but now everything comes down to economics, and money. So the men not inheriting, for example, I was against that. I thought sons and daughters should inherit equally because the youngest will inherit the most because she looks after her parents. She looks after everyone else who is in trouble in the clan. But yeah, that's what I wanted to express really. About Matrilini. I'm not against Matrilini. I'm just saying make adjustments, make changes so that we can move forward and move with the times.
Okay. I'm actually very curious about the short story Limp. So in the short story, there's a Bengali man, who's just come to Shillong as an immigrant, and he's in his 20s, and he finally feels a sense of home in the city. I'm just wondering, is this anyway inspired by your father's journey?
Inspired by?
Is the story anyway inspired by your father's journey? The short story Limp?
Not really, my father immediately settled in very comfortably in Shillong because his father was a lawyer. In fact, he retired as the president of the Shillong Bar Association, and my father learned the language perfectly. And yes, I know so many East Bengalis because of my father's family and his connection with Ramakrishna Mission and so on. And I really thought, yeah, they needed a voice, they needed a voice. And maybe, yes, in a way, yes.
Right. Thank you. That was a very interesting, trivia question that made me wonder when I read it.
No, I'm glad. I didn't think about it, but yeah, when you ask me, yes, of course. I'm really for humanity. I'm for all the communities, because I grew up in a home like that, where all the communities were there from all walks of life, religion, caste, creed, and color. So I'm really, I believe in humanity, and maybe that but the Bengali Khasi problem is very evident. So obviously, I was going to write about Nipendro. He was a representative of that community.
All right. Also, the book cover is very intriguing. It looks like, there's a trail leading to the hills at what looks like twilight, if I'm not wrong. I'm very, very interested to know, does it point to a particular event or any story in the book?
Yes, Shadow Men starts around dusk. When the lights come on in Shillong, we're having tea because it's an eastern town and, the sun sets very early. So the first chapter of the book begins at dusk. So now I used to see the cottage where she is, where Rasil is, you know, and action starts from there. There's chaos, and there's going to be violence, and there's fear. So then, and she looks out of the window of that little cottage on the hill, you know. And what is important about the cover was, and I'm so glad my publishers liked it, is a mountain in the distance, unmoving, indestructible, calm and strong. Because I grew up believing that nature is our best friend, our best guide, our best comforter. It's a source of strength. So that when you see the mountain in the distance, you know, that's really part of me. I'll just tell you, you know, when I read Sir Edmund Hillary's book, and the first words he said when he, I don't like the word conquered, when he arrived at the summit of Mount Everest, was he messaged back or sent a message back to his friend George Lowe, who was a co-mountaineer, who was a mountaineer friend, and he said, "Well, George, we beat the bastard," and that devastated me. I mean, he's reached Everest, and this is what he said. And after that, when I think of Everest and first arrival in Everest, I think just Tenzing Norgay. So that mountain on the book is a symbol of strength for me, of calm. It's a source of comfort and a source of the importance and indestructibility of nature, which we have to respect. And it's done by a friend. You see, this photograph is also special because it was taken by a friend's son, Cyril Kun, who celebrates his birthday today. He's a brilliant photographer, and I was so glad that I could put it on my cover, and it just covered everything I felt about the book and the two stories, and myself. Yeah.
Well, happy birthday to him. It's definitely a great book cover. Yeah, it's so impactful, like it's so well thought out.
Yes. Thank you. It is really a very special photograph. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, coming to your journey as a translator, you began translating by starting with your great granduncle's book. So, how have your books been received so far? You know,
there's a great response, and Vivekananda Kendra Institute of Culture taking it up. You know, all my translations is like amazing for me and for the work I've put in. Actually, my maternal family, like from the 19th century, they've been translating, notably my great-grandfather, Jibon Roy Mairom. He translated the Hita Upadesha in 1888, and then parts of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana from Sanskrit into Khasi in 1900, followed by Buddha Charitra and Chaitanya Charitra. He was hoping that, you know, the people of the hills would imbibe some of the wisdom of ancient India. But it was not easy because, you know, East India Company had arrived, the missionaries had arrived, and he just couldn't fight them. And the first edition of these books are still in our family library under the custody of my cousin Mayanti now. And yeah, and then in 1975, my aunt Sitiman, who in the next generation continued writing about indigenous culture and religion, she told me one day, "You must translate Kajing Snengtem and the teachings of elders." I said, "Oh my God, you know, 109 stanzas and perfect Khasi, and each stanza is about 8 to 10 couplets. I said, how can you ask me to do this? She said, "Well, if you don't, then a very important facet of Khasi culture will sink into oblivion." So I said, okay, you know, like I really had no choice in the matter. And by God's grace, and I think the blessings of ancestors, I managed to do it. And the next important one was the main ceremonies, the Khasis. So she told me that, I was quite startled actually. You know, she has a friend, my aunt was very much involved into child welfare and social work. She was also an educationist and a writer. And she had a friend from the Christian community, a wonderful woman. And she attended one of our family marriages. And then after that, she told my aunt, you know, Kang Sitimon, I didn't know that we Khasis had actually got ceremonies. So we must write about it. So my aunt immediately wrote this, you know, very detailed, very detailed article on the Khasi marriage, which I translated along with the naming ceremony and the last rites written by my cousin Walampang. Because these are the three main ceremonies of our religion. It was very tough because, you know, it's so detailed and fiction is much easier. Yeah.
Wow, so you actually started translating as a way to preserve your cultural heritage, and it was not just an active translation per se.
Oh no, the family is from my great grandfather's time, I said from the 19th century. He was so sure that we had to preserve our culture and tradition, to preserve our identity, to be confident, and yet imbibe every other culture and tradition around us. But you know, he believes that, you know, a tree cannot grow without its roots, no matter how well you water it. So be rooted. I mean, imbibe everything else around you. Respect everything. You know, when I talk about my religion, I'll tell you about respect. Well, I'll tell you now because it's sort of flowing. The Teachings of Elders is the Khasi book of ethics and etiquette. So ethics is the moral code, and people say, why etiquette? Well, for the Khasis, etiquette is not mere social grace. It's a form of worship. In our religion, we believe in Ublay, who's imageless and formless, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent. And respect is very important. I mean, every good word, thought, and deed of the day is a prayer, an offering, unparalleled to any other. So respect was very important for all his creations, animate and inanimate. Whether it's, you know, it's the flora, the fauna, people of all caste, creed, religion, class, there's no such thing. Respect is very important because when you respect that person or the tree or the river, then you're respecting the creator. That's the essence of our religion.
You must know a lot of traditional Khasi stories. What are some, you know, that you grew up reading and that have, you know, impacted you as a writer and a reader?
Well, actually, ours was an oral tradition till 1842 when the Welsh missionary, Reverend Thomas Jones, introduced the Roman alphabet. So a lot of stories were told orally, you know. And in fact, the minute we got an alphabet, then Radhan Singh Berry Karwan Lang wrote the Teachings of Elders immediately. And my great-grandfather, Jibon Roy, set up a printing press specially for these books and his own. So the stories were told orally. You know, in my mother's time, there used to be a woman who used to travel all the way from Cherrapunji, walking over the hills and dales, and she used to come and tell stories. They were folk tales. So folk tales were what I heard as a child. And, you know, I think, you know, like when you tell a folk tale, each person tells his or her version. So it's more a transcreation. So I think my creativity sprang from there. Because each person would tell the story about why we serve pan in the house. And it'd be slightly different. Or, you know, why do this doves sing? Do not sing, but coo. It'd be slightly different. So I realized that stories are, you know, so I learned to be creative because of that. And those were the stories. Otherwise, once I went to school, then it was Enid Blyton. And, so, you know,
yes,
it was,
that's so fascinating. Your childhood seems so colorful. Also, what are the you know, other traditional writers? Can you recommend a few writers of books from Meghalaya or Assam, you know, as recommendations for our listeners?
Well, we are 8 sisters, so I'll have to mention all of them. Well, let me begin with Nagaland. I mean, I can only mention people I've read. There's so many writers, actually. So Nagaland, I think Temsula Ao, Istarine Kire, Mona Lisa Chankija, I've read, they're really amazing. Then Mamang Dai from Arunachal Pradesh. Then you go to Sikkim, it's Prajwal Julie, and if you read his like Gurkha's Daughter, it stays with you forever. Tripura, there are a lot of writers who write in Kurbaruk, the main language, but they haven't translated into English, so I haven't read them. But I've met the writers in Jharkhand recently. They're really very bright and very creative. Then you go to Meghalaya, my own state. Mm-hmm. There's so many writers there in English because because Janice Pariat and Anjum Hassan, I think, are very, very good. And there are 3 boys who actually belong to Assam and Bengal, but who are Shillong boys, who've written very good books. That's Ankush Saikia, Dhruva Saikia, and Nilanjan Roy. But I think the poets are very good. I think Khasi is very reticent and they'd rather write poetry, so there's a wall between the reader and what they're feeling. So there's Streamlet Dakar, Esthas Aim, and of course the iconic Kanfam Singh Nongkanri, who wrote that poem, Desmond Karmorplang, Paul Lingdo, who was also a minister in the last cabinet, Michael Aim, and a very young poetess also, Anis Islanti. I think she's very good. These are from Meghalaya. Then Mizoram has just, they've just got the first a novel in English written by a Mizo girl. I think I've written her name somewhere because I don't remember, I can't get, because I haven't read her. Malsomi Jacob. So she's written the Song of Redemption. I'm really interested to read that book because it talks about the insurgency during the 1960s and how the Mizos fought. And it'll be very special for me because my father, who was the last IG of undivided Assam, Assam was a huge state with all his states. He was very involved there and he loved the people. Love the Nagas and the Mizos and all the communities in Assam. There's so many tribes. And I would love to read that book. Her name is Malsomi Jacob. And the name of the book is the Redemption Song. I mean, I would really love to read that book. And then Assam, of course. There's so many of them. So let's go for the nonfiction first. You must read Sanjoy Hazarika. He's really in-depth and well-researched articles. But I would also recommend 2 people who are not really from Assam, but who've written so warmly about the problems there. And if you want to know about the Northeast, then you read Shudeep Chakrabarti, Highway 39, and In Pursuit of Conflict by Avlog Langan. You get to meet the people, you get to meet the militants, you get to meet just about everyone in the Northeast in a very objective yet warm kind of interaction. Then of course from the fiction writers, there's Aruni Kashyap and there's so many, and of course Mitra Phukan. I love her books. I think all her books are so good. I mean, they're neither light or heavy. They're enjoyable, they're well-researched. In fact, just now I'm reading one of her translations by a Sahitya Academy awardee, Virinchi Kumar Barua, and translated by her, called Aghoni Bai. It's really charming. That's a really good book. And in Manipur, I think one should read Shomi Roy's translation of his mother's book, Princess Binodini. She writes about it. It's a beautiful book. It's The Princess and the Political Agent. And of course, their famous Manipuri poet, Robbie Nomgom. He's amazing. So these are the books I've read. There's just so many that, but I must say that, our journalist, Patricia Mukim, she's actually a journalist, a dynamic journalist, the editor of Shillong Times. She's written this book, Waiting for an Unequal World. Just the title would say something about her. She's written a very, very good book, and I think it should be read. And I take this opportunity to say that she's also a great conservationist. She, along with ex-IFS officer Rudy Wardry and Brian Walang, who's educationist, the way they've been cleaning up our rivers, cleaning up the rivers, because, I mean, they were choked with dirt and plastic. I take this opportunity to salute them. You know, this is also something so important in the Northeast, all over India, but the way they've been doing it in Meghalaya, I mean, Patricia and Rudy Wardry, Brian Walang, and the entire team. I mean, and her book is very good also. Waiting for an equal world, you know. So there's many, many layers to that, yeah.
Wow, ma'am, that's a boatload of recommendations. Thank you so much for all those.
My favorite books, and there's so much talent in the Northeast, and people should connect by reading. You know, you begin a little bit with the non-fiction of and Avlok Langer, and then you go on to the fiction. You know, you must know the background. In the same way, I recommend people who come out from the Northeast to work and to study, to know a little bit about mainland India before they step out. Just I feel that people who come to the Northeast, even as officers and all that, they should learn a little bit about the Northeast. Because, you know, the little sensitivities and all, you have to know the little nuances. If you come, you get a more positive response. Mm-hmm. Even our children who go out into the mainland India and are workers, and people in different sectors, they should also learn a bit. So then we learn to live in harmony. I mean, that's why I wrote Shadow, and for God's sake, end this conflict somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So this makes me wonder about the, the tribals of the Northeast. Is there any literature available about the indigenous religion of Niam, Khasi, Niam tribe available?
Best book, I think the second edition, which has been edited and all, should be coming out, but this lockdown is a bit difficult. It's called Where Lies the Soul of My Race. It's essays about the Nyam Khasi Nyam Tre, written by all the elders. Many of them have passed away. And it's a really in-depth study about the religion, all encompassing the essence of the religion is that we're all one. There's only one God, really. And religion is not meant to cause conflict and misery. It's not meant to divide people. And we are just getting too ritualistic, too superficial. But I really hope this crisis, present pandemic, will heal the people and make them realize that. That's what the Khasis believe. That's why I get so shocked with the violence and the hatred that's happening. So with this wonderful collection, I hope it comes out soon. And I'll let you know. I think it should be well advertised so people will read more about it, yes. Because most people didn't know there was a religion in Meghalaya, called Nyam Khasi Nyam Tre. Very few people knew, yes.
Are there other translations, fiction or non-fiction, besides, yours, that you would recommend to our listeners, that you usually read or that you think everyone should read?
Translations, I think the more important ones, it depends what you want to read. I mean, the translations of fiction, there are very few, but there are many, many transcreations of folktales. There's one by Kanfam Singh Nonkanri, there's one by Dr. Desmond Karmau Plang, there's one by me. Those are folktales.
Great, thank you so much, ma'am. It was lovely speaking to you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you. Because especially we started with love and harmony. And that's what eventually I want the book to bring about everywhere. Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am.